Joining us as always on Fridays, it is Andy Katz with some tier talk. I do a bad job every week, Andy, of we kind of like dive into discussion, and I don't set the stage with your tiers. And we need to do this week. So we got Gonzaga Baylor tier 1. And by the way, disclaimer, because I could feel Andy just kind of losing his mind a little bit. Like this was 2 days ago. A lot has changed between then and now. Gonzaga and Baylor at the top, obviously. Yep. He has tier 2 in parentheses 1B.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's good, Andy. I like 1B.
Villanova and Michigan. Tier 3 is Florida State, Virginia, Iowa, Alabama, Houston. Tier 4, Ohio State, Illinois, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Texas, West Virginia. Tier 4 is loaded. Creighton, Drake, and then Boise State. And I think we got to start here, Andy. You come on our show,
stopping us.
You yell at us that we don't believe in Boise State, and then immediately, the Broncos. What happened?
Okay, let me defend myself. First of all, yes, I did do these before that game ended late on the East Coast. But I actually emailed our team at foxsports.com, and I said, you know what? I'm going to leave it. Because, yes, Boise got rocked at Colorado State. Mm-hmm. And it is not easy to go into Moby. Sidebar, years ago, when I used to cover the WAC, what they used to do is they actually would put a live ram by the visitor bench. And it would stink to high heaven. And it would do whatever it's going to do on the back end. And really fumigate that visitor bench. They got rid of the live mascot. So that added to how difficult the place it was to play.
So Boise State was ready for
Nico Medved, Colorado State, they are clearly on the up in the Mountain West. So I'm reserving judgment to see if Boise can get a split and they play Friday night at Colorado State. Because if they get a split at Colorado State, then I think Boise still deserves to be on the back end of the tier 4. Now, I will say this before you even ask me, and I got some flack on this with where's Tennessee. Tennessee, to me, has been very disappointing the last couple of weeks.
I agree with
you.
Very.
I think they got to earn their way back in to my good graces because of the way they've played lately.
Well, congratulations to Boise State. It sounds like you're declaring them a blue blood, giving them blue blood treatment where they lose and you're like, no, hang on. Hang on.
They have a chance to write this.
Like Duke was, I see Duke, you have Duke and Kentucky in tier 5. We cut that out, though. We didn't want 300, but no. All right, we won't give up on Boise State yet. I have this bone to pick with you, though, Andy. I saw this week you were interviewing Mark Few and Scott Drew at the same time. And you're doing like – I don't know. Maybe I'm just like too cynical. Maybe I'm just like too much of a negative guy. But like, I didn't like the visual, Andy. I'll be honest. I didn't like you rubbing both their bellies and like, hey, Mark, say something nice about Scott. And Scott, say something. Like, we have this situation in college basketball. It only comes around once every so often where there's like two titans.
You want beef. You want rivalries.
We have a rivalry set up. They were supposed to play each other. They didn't play each other this year. Yep. Like, that is the theme of college basketball. We want them to hate each other. Their names are similar, Drew and Few. Like, it's all neither one of them have ever won a title before. It's all aligned for this to be awesome, and then you're having these two guys on your on the same interview where you're like, "Aren't we all friends?" Like, what's going on, Andy?
Okay, first of all, you're not going to get them to dislike each other. That's just not in their DNAs. So if we want a hated rivalry, we're going to have to wait for something else because it's not going to happen with Gonzaga and Baylor. Former Zags are on the Baylor staff. Scott Drew comes from the Homer Drew of niceties, if you will. I mean, he's like the nicest human being, not just in the state of Indiana, but maybe in the country.
Disgust me.
And so it is filtered off to the family. So you're not going to get that. Now, here's the interesting scenario, okay? Because I don't think the Big 12 will do this, but on February 6th, there's an opening for Gonzaga because Santa Clara is on pause, and now they have an open weekend. I would love to see Bob Bowlesby and the Big 12 say, you know what, TCU, I'm sorry, Jamie Dixon and your crew, you're going to put that game off. We're going to have Baylor play that weekend against Gonzaga. I don't think it'll happen, but suddenly we've got an open weekend for Gonzaga. That's number one. Number two, if it doesn't happen sooner than later, it's not going to happen. And at that point, if we get to a point like third week in February and it's clearly not going to happen, then I say, let's get them both undefeated. I'm going to actually put a fan hat on. I'm going to root for it.
Yep.
And I want to see both of them April 5th.
In the title game.
Undefeated. Guaranteed the first undefeated national champ since 1976. And if we have 2 undefeated teams, now they wouldn't be 40, like Kentucky tried to be in 15, but if we have 2 undefeated teams playing for the national championship at Lucas Oil, that would
Indiana,
be a capper on
in the state that Bob Knight built.
Yeah, in the state that the last undefeated team came from, Andy. I think a lot of Hoosiers would be very upset with that. To be rubbing it in your face like that. I just had a problem. And you have the 2 coaches. Like we want like the heavyweight. Like it's like a boxing, the weigh-in, and you have them sitting across from each other. Like they're not hugging each other. They're not just like throwing their arm around each. We need some more. Whatever. Who cares? Who cares?
Andy, I have to ask you about Tier 3 because I think Titus and we've been watching the ACC all season. We've been trying to figure out who's going to take the leap. You got Florida State, you got Virginia there. What do they have to do to kind of get into that 1B, a.k.a. Tier 2 status? Like, how do you jump up and get there? Because Florida State and Virginia are both hot right now, and I feel like a lot of people have turned against Virginia this year, but they're still, obviously the best team in the ACC, it seems, right now. So what do they have to do to jump up to Tier 1, Tier 1B?
So first of all, I would challenge you on that. I don't think it's obvious. I think Florida State could say they are the best team in the ACC. The manner in which they're just crushing teams. Yes. Virginia had that big scare against Georgia Tech, and we do know the welder, Kastner. If you've seen the way he's wearing the headgear, he's actually got a squad that's got great fight in them, and they really should have beaten Duke at Cameron. They kind of fumbled that game away in the last minute and a half. Yep. They were the better team, I thought. For most of that game, Jose Alvarado was taking it to Duke. So Georgia Tech pushed Virginia really toward the end, and Virginia held on. I want to reserve judgment before we see Florida State versus Virginia, but I think Florida State has a legit shot to not be a 1 seed, but to crack a Tier 2 kind of situation where we're looking at them like a Final Four contender because they've got the goods, certainly, to do that. I mean, the difference with this Florida State team, since they came off a pause, is they've been scoring exceptionally well. Yep. Usually Leonard Hamilton's teams, they defend, and sometimes they go through droughts, and they, sometimes it's manufactured scoring, but they're getting up and down. And they're not being led by Scotty Barnes, who was their highest profile, player. So, he's one of their guys. And I think his ceiling is only going to rise. And so, they're only going to get better.
I love the Seminoles. I love that.
I want to ask you this because I'm curious because I sometimes rank teams and put stuff together, and I know what's going on in your brain as you do this, and you're always throwing a team or two on there that's like, I don't actually believe in this team, but I feel obligated to put them on there. So that's my question to you, Andy, is which team is it this week, and why is it Creighton?
So that was a good example because I was holding my breath a little in the Seton Hall game.
Yeah.
Because I was all in on Creighton. But I think that's a great example of their fight, their ability to finish games. Marcus Zagorowski has not been 100% healthy this season. And once he hopefully does get healthy later this month, the combination of Zagorowski and Mitchell Ballack, will give them that 1-2 punch. At the end of last season, by the way, I know they had Tyshawn Alexander as well, but they were one of the most efficient offensive teams in the country, and they were going in the right direction where I think they would have been a real tough out toward the end of the season. So Creighton, I hedged on them. I really did. And so then when they held off and won at Seton Hall, I'm glad I put them in. I want to circle back one quick thing because I know even though he's wearing a Nets jersey, he's got Carolina blood in him. I will say this. I do think if you were to say, and this will stir the pot a little.
Yeah.
Speaking of stocks are in the news right now. If I were to buy stock in a team on Tobacco Road, I would buy it more in Carolina than Duke over the final month of the season.
Absolutely, Andy.
Wow.
6 out of 7.
Hang the banner.
Yeah.
Hang the banner.
I told you. Stop talking about the Blue Bloods being dead. We're okay. We're just sitting over here.
Yeah, Carolina is definitely figuring things out. They're heading in the right direction. I just don't have faith, and everyone thinks I hate Duke, which is not true. But still, I'm not buying into this particular Duke team.
Neither am I.
I had this thought too. So I saw you had Drake listed, which I won't.
15-0, Titus.
Yeah, I won't make you say whether or not that was an obligated pick.
Hey, they swept Missouri State, which only had one loss prior to that. I mean, these are road games.
Okay, I had a bigger picture question about Drake and Winthrop, who's also undefeated, 16-0. Do you anticipate if both these teams are undefeated, and it's probably unlikely they'll enter March Madness undefeated, but just for a thought exercise, if they are, do you anticipate this being a challenge for the committee in terms of where to seed them, or do you think it's going to actually be more straightforward than, they're obviously not going to get 1 seeds. We're not arguing they should, but do you think it's even going to be a challenge at all? Do you think they're going to sweat over the fact that there's a 0 in the loss column, or do you think it's just going to be like, oh, the Winthrop's 115 on KenPom, they're obviously not that good, here's a 12 seed, be happy with it?
So on Winthrop, I don't see them getting that high a seed.
Yeah,
I think 11, 12 could be their ceiling. Drake will be interesting. Whether or not they can get as high, could they get as high as a 6?
Mm-hmm.
5 or
I don't
6,
know.
Yeah.
I'd
Drake,
probably say no.
Yeah, isn't Drake from the 6?
And maybe that's not fair, but they literally have nothing on the resume prior to the Valley. And while the Valley is decent, that hurts. Go back to Loyola Chicago, okay? When they got to the Final Four, they won at Florida. And that carried weight, and they still didn't get a great seed. So, the Valley, and look, I know it's unprecedented, but there's just nothing else on that resume outside of the Valley for them. And so I don't think that they're going to get the benefit of the doubt and be much higher seed, even if they end up being undefeated.
I think you celebrate a 6 seed if you're Drake.
Yeah, that would be pretty good. My last question for you, Andy. Explain the conference tournament situation. Tate and I obviously know what's going on. We're in this. We're very, very smart. But maybe for some of our slower listeners, there's a lot of talk about teams maybe opting out of conference tournaments. Maybe conferences as a whole are going to opt out.
We got the Big Ten situation where they may play in Indianapolis and stay in Indianapolis.
Again,
all right, let me clear it up.
Yeah. What's going on?
Okay, I'm going to tell you what I think will happen. I think there's a lot more bark than bite, and I'll give you a couple examples. Number 1, the Big Ten has not announced yet, but I fully expect them to announce that they're going to Indianapolis. So now you take the Big Ten, put them in Indy, perfect. They're under the protocols of Marion County the whole way through. They're fine. They hold their tournament. They're good. Big 12 is going to Kansas City and going to create a bubble in Kansas City and go right from Kansas City to Indy. So they're good. Ultimately, I think the ACC and the SEC will have their tournaments. Even if 1 or 2 opts out, that's not going to affect the committee because I don't see a bottom dweller winning it. So whoever would win it would still be probably a team that would have been in at large. But think about, and this is unfortunate, think about parts of the country. And SEC tournament in Nashville, ACC as of now in North Carolina. These are places that have been a little bit different than the Northeast or California or the Northwest in terms of the virus. They actually may be allowing fans. And, the American, for example, is having their tournament in Frisco, Texas. Texas has had a different attitude on the virus. They've already allowed fans. They're going to have their tournament. I'm convinced of that. The big one out there is Gonzaga. Do they convince the WCC not to have it, or do they opt out? And if they opt out, ultimately, I think that could hurt them because now you're going on, they would be, from March 1st or something? They would go all the way from there till March 19th or 20th without playing.
Wow.
And that's a long time. I don't care how good you are. We just saw it, and they're better than Michigan State, but we just saw what happened to Michigan State, when they didn't play for 20 days. So, I don't think that's a good thing for their rhythm. And so, and the other thing, I'll just say this about conference tournaments. Yes, they're not going to have the gates this year they normally would. But the television contracts, are important. And if the Big East, for example, doesn't happen, why would Fox Sports have to pay the Big East the same amount?
Yeah, we're going to kill you.
Would have less windows.
If the Big East doesn't play, we're going to kill
sponsorship dollars. A lot of them originate in those conferences. The WCC last year, they didn't get their NCAA tournament money. They got all their conference money because they actually finished their tournament before we shut down. So they got their TV windows, they got their corporate sponsorship, and so they actually were able to meet their budget up to that point. And there's value in that. And so I don't think that if we have a few, maybe, I think the majority of these, if not all, will happen.
So, but what is the thought about not doing it? So, like, why? Like, everything you said makes sense to us, obviously. But what if
It's just paranoia of the virus.
it's just like
paranoia
Okay.
of
that.
the 7 days of negative testing before you arrive in Indy. Which,
Okay.
by the way, if you're Gonzaga, the WCC ends on like March 8th or 7th, and so you still could have 7-day negative. You can go back to Spokane if you want, have 7 days negative, arrive in Indy if you want on the 15th or something. You're still not going to play until the following Saturday or Sunday. So I still think there's plenty of room. Or I guess it could have been Friday. You could play Friday or Saturday, excuse me, because the first four is going to be Thursday. So either Friday or Saturday, but they could position and play Saturday as the top overall or the co-1. I just think ultimately, unless things change dramatically, which obviously everything's fluid, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure. And the last thing I will tell you guys is conference commissioner to conference commissioner. So hypothetically, let's say this happens, Gonzaga pulls out and Pacific wins the WCC. So now they take Pacific, maybe BYU and Gonzaga, 3 bids. Where's that bid coming from? What if it comes from the Big East and Providence doesn't make it? If I'm Val Ackerman, am I going to be happy with Gloria Navarez and says, wait a minute, you guys scammed the system. One of your teams that shouldn't have won it, didn't have to play Gonzaga, won it. Now you take away a bid from my league from a team that should be in. I think that's going to create a lot of tension if stuff like that happens.
Yeah. Which would be great for guys like us who have to talk about.
Yeah,
all
we
the
like some
drama.
Yeah.
Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck to your Boise State Broncos trying to get that split with Colorado State. I know you're sweating bullets, hoping they can pull.
By the way, Mark, see, had you played back then at Moby, no
Yeah.
offense, but you were toward the back part of that bench. You would have been near that ram.
Oh, I would have found ways to get off. I would have been like in the locker room, probably just on Twitter during the game or something. Thanks, Andy. You're the best,
Andy.
man.